Mhm.
Um, and so today is June 5th, 2021. My name is Chelsea Lee, and I'm here with Miss Diana Wynn, and we will be conducting an hour-long interview. So let's get started.
Sure.
Um, so let's first start with like your early life. Where and when were you born? How would you describe like the household and neighborhood you grew up in?
I was born in Taiwan. I left when I was around 5 years old. I moved to New York for maybe 6 months, and then my family relocated to San Francisco, and that's where I grew up. I grew up in the I grew up in the Castro district in San Francisco. I don't know if you're familiar with that area, but it's a gay neighborhood. In fact, it's one of the biggest gay neighborhoods in San Francisco. And our restaurant was called Happy Boy. My sisters and I grew up in the restaurant. First, we had to prepare food in the kitchen, and I always tell my children, I tell them that they have Play-Doh to play with, but I had to play with raw meat. I had to make hundreds and hundreds of hamburger patties every day. So I did that for many years until I was in my teenage years.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, what would you say were some of the values that your parents emphasized during your upbringing?
No doubt, they definitely taught us hard work because we never left the restaurant. 7 days a week, we lived there, we slept there, we did our homework there. And I used to tell my kids that homework for us was never a priority. Taking care of a customer was.
Mm.
It was all about the customer. So I don't know how I ended up going to college because grades was not a priority in my family at all.
So yeah, you mentioned that your whole family had immigrated to the U.S.
Chelsea, I'm sorry, your voice is cutting in and out.
Oh, okay. I will speak a little louder.
Sure.
So you mentioned that your whole family had immigrated to the U.S.
Yes.
Was there kind of like a reason they decided to move, or like a defining moment in this decision?
My father came to the U.S. to go to school, and he got his master's at Northwestern University. And I think that he really felt like there were more opportunities in America, and so he wanted to bring the whole family here.
Yeah, so I'm gonna kind of move on to your college experience now. I saw that you attended UC Berkeley for English literature. Can you speak a bit about any challenges you face or anything you learned in particular during this time?
Um, I was surprised to see how few Asians there were in my classes, but I really enjoy reading and I enjoy literature. And so I learned how to be a better writer, and I learned how to think critically. And that's definitely served me well because I went into acting. And so actors have to go through scripts and break it down, understand the characters. So it definitely was a great background for an actor.
Sure. So what other subjects were you kind of interested in studying, and why did you end up choosing English literature specifically?
My sister also was an English lit major. So I was a little bit lazy. I saw that she was enjoying what she was doing, and I always enjoyed reading and writing. So I figured I should just follow in her footsteps. But like I said, I took a few other classes like acting and art, and I fell in love with acting. Once I started taking acting classes, I couldn't think of anything but that. I just love the idea of performing, and in some ways, it's like an extension of English literature, right? Because we are bringing the words to life, right? It's no longer about just reading, writing, and analyzing. It's about bringing those stories to life.
Yeah. Um, and did your parents ever decide to try to like influence your decision on your major or weigh in on any of that?
I don't think my father thought much of it. I don't think he really was involved in. I think that my father wasn't really. He didn't really care what we studied. He was more concerned with what kind of career we would have afterwards. And so, right after college, I decided to become an actor. And he wasn't really supportive of that because he wasn't sure I could even survive. And certainly, it's hard to survive in theater, which is what I did for many years. But I just loved it so much. And eventually, I went on to work in films and television. And when I became a dialogue coach for Jackie Chan, then suddenly he cared about what I was doing because he knew Jackie Chan.
Yeah.
But other than that, he didn't care.
Yeah, I bet. And so thinking back to your time in college, what were some like really defining moments that you can remember? Sorry, did I would you
Your voice is cutting in and out.
Oh, okay. Then I'll repeat the question. So thinking back to your time in
Okay.
college, what were some defining moments that you recall?
Well, let's see. I would say um, taking acting classes really changed my life because it took me down another path that I didn't even think about. Um, it all started when I entered a Chinese speech competition and I won. And after my competition, a lot of people came up to me and said, "You seem like you're an actor. Did you ever study acting?" And so many people said that to me that I thought, what is acting? I never even thought about that. So I thought I'll take a class to see whether it was something that I could go into. And my first class wasn't all that interesting. I didn't really like the instructor that much. So I didn't, think much of it. But I thought I'll take another class just to see. And the second class really changed my life because my professor, she was actually a grad student, Regina Dorocati. She was so inspirational and so fun and so supportive that when I saw what she was doing, I thought, this is what I want to do too. I want to have as much fun as she has. And she just was so passionate about acting and she encouraged all the students. And so after that, one of my classmates started the first Asian American theater company on campus. So I joined and we performed a couple of plays and that really took me down it opened up possibilities of what kind of life I could have.
For sure. And so, yeah, I guess transitioning now to your role as a dialogue coach, I see that you were a dialogue coach to Jackie Chan and other actors such as Chris Tucker and Zhang Ziyi through various films such as Monkey, The Karate Kid, Rush Hour, Shanghai Noon, and many more. And this is so interesting. Um, like, how did you get into this position, and did you ever envision yourself in this role?
So I moved from San Francisco to LA, like all my friends, to continue acting. And within a year, I had two agents and a manager. So my manager told me to go into a meeting because they needed a dialogue coach for Jackie for Rush Hour. And I figured, my Chinese isn't very good, but most likely the producers won't be Chinese and they won't know how bad my Chinese was. But, I thought it didn't hurt to go to the interview. So I went to the interview and in comes Jackie Chan and his entire entourage. And I went, uh-oh, they're going to know how bad my Chinese is now. I can't get out of this. And sure enough, that's what happened. I talked to Jackie in Cantonese because I had learned that in school. And he said to me, your Cantonese is so strange. Where are you from? Where did you learn that? Malaysia? And I said, no, I learned my Cantonese in San Francisco's Chinatown. And he said, when you speak Cantonese, you sound like you're in pain. And I thought, okay, it's probably true because Chinese is a painful language, it's hard to speak it right. And so in the back of my mind, I was thinking this interview is not going well. I'm not going to get this job. Then I spoke to him in Mandarin and he said it was still pretty bad, but not as bad as my Cantonese. And suddenly the conversation shifted and they started talking about fight scenes. And I was excluded in this conversation for like 45 minutes. And I thought, should I interrupt them and tell them I'm still here? Do you have any questions for me? Should I leave? But I decided not to say anything and let them finish. And eventually somebody said, oh, you're still here. You can leave. So I thought, okay, I gathered my stuff and I thought I didn't leave any kind of impression. I had to say something interesting, but I didn't know what. So as I was leaving the room, I opened a door and half my body's out the door. And I turned back into the room and I said to Jackie in Mandarin, I said, those fight scenes that you talked about for the jail is really funny. You should keep all those ideas and welcome to America. And then 4 hours later, I got a phone call and I got the job.
Wow.
Yeah, it was so shocking to me because he had criticized me and he didn't seem to like me at all. And of course, deservingly so. My Chinese is not very good. And so for him to hire me was truly amazing. And then I got the job. I worked on Rush Hour for 4 months.
Wow. And so say like if a star does not pronounce something like correctly, how do you help correct their pronunciation? Do you break down the language into like diction, intonation, and accents? Like how do you do it?
For Jackie, he is not a very patient man when it comes to dialogue. So it was crazy, just crazy. I would write down his lines in English and I would break it down into syllables. And sometimes I would write like another English word that was similar to that word, or I would actually find a Chinese character that sounded like that word. And sometimes I would put little happy faces or sad faces to remind him where he needed to be emotionally.
Yeah.
And I would repeat over and over again before, during the entire process.
Wow. Yeah. I guess you kind of touched on to my next question, but what was it like to work with Mr. Chan?
It was crazy in every possible way because he loves action, right? And he cares about that. But the dialogue is the last thing on his mind. And he doesn't have the patience to sit there and listen to me explain things to him. So often it was me running after him with his lines, screaming them out so that he could try to remember because he walks fast, right? So I'm carrying my backpack, I'm carrying his lines, I'm screaming his lines as we run to set. And to me, as an actor, your lines are the most important thing, right? But not for him, not at all. And so sometimes I would go into his trailer and there'll be 10 people in his trailer and he'll tell me to sit down and wait. And he'll do meetings with each person and I would be the last person he talks to. But by the time it was my turn to talk to him, they wanted us on the set. And he didn't even have a chance to even look at his dialogue. So what making Rush Hour was really scary because I thought I would be fired every week. I was expecting someone to fire me because I didn't feel I didn't feel like we were doing a very good job, and we were struggling constantly in every scene. And you can tell in the outtakes, right? But the entire film was like that. The entire film, every single day, every single scene, every single sentence was a struggle. Sometimes we did a line 20 times, 30 times, whatever it took to get it right. And of course, it was hard on his ego.
Mhm.
And often when he looked at me, I could see hatred. He didn't seem to really enjoy this process at
Yeah.
all. Um, so I didn't know whether I would be fired by him or fired by production because I just didn't feel like we were doing a very good job.
Yeah, so what are some of the common mistakes, I guess, of pronouncing either Chinese or English for English speakers learning Chinese or for Chinese speakers learning English?
So for Jackie, um, he has a hard time making the th sounds of a word. So like the ending of words, he forgets to pronounce. And so I would have to often circle the ending of the sound of a word, like my daughter's name, Elizabeth. I would have to say th, Elizabeth. And I would put a little tongue over the th to remind him of sticking his tongue out just a little bit to make that sound. So I would find moments like that in the script where he needed to be reminded of how to place his tongue when he spoke.
That requires, I bet, a lot of attention to detail and like creativity.
Yes, and he doesn't have the patience for that. So it was a constant struggle to get the words out of his mouth properly. And he would sometimes, lose it because he didn't want to do this over and over again, especially in front of a crew of maybe 400 people sometimes. And it was hard on the ego. And so there are moments where, he would walk off or he would give me the hand, which means this. It means go away. He couldn't say go away. He would just give me the hand, and I would know to back off, give him some space, and then come back a few minutes later.
Yeah, I guess then what were some of your favorite or least favorite parts of being a dialogue coach?
I work with him on so many projects. I think 16 or 17 of them. Eventually, I got to know him better as a person, right? And our relationship changed because I was a stranger working with him, and it takes some time to get to know you. And I think that trusting me, I think helped. If the film did not do well, I think I would have never heard from him. But because Rush Hour did so well, he hired me for the next 20 years. And I work with him on all kinds of projects: animation, commercials, infomercials, films. Um, and our relationship changed because we got to know each other better.
Yeah, I guess um, when you were working with all these like different actors and like different personalities, what were maybe some challenges that came up with that as well?
Because I'm an actor, I'm very respectful of the space that an actor needs to create. So whenever we go on a set, I never really know, how much to talk to someone because they may need time to get into character. And so I often give them lots of space. Um, but it was a joy to see so many of them and see their creative process. And they're all different because of their training and their background. Some are trained theatrically, and some have no training at all. Some improvise, like Chris Tucker. Chris Tucker improvises everything. So every day that we did a scene, we didn't know what he was going to say. And so it changed every take. And that would change Jackie's lines because if Chris says one thing, then Jackie will have to say something else. But it was so hard for Jackie to memorize those lines that when he had to change his lines suddenly, it did make him very happy. And so, like I said, every day was a struggle to get the scene done. But it was fun too, from my point of view, to see how creative actors could become. Chris Tucker had so much leeway to improvise. They let him do whatever he wanted to do, whatever he wanted to say, and every take got better and better. And so that was like magical to see that. He didn't like the script. He'll look at the script and go, I'm not gonna do that. And boom, we're improvising and doing what we can to get the scene to work. So that's really fun to watch. Um, but I've worked with so many different actors. My last film with Jackie was The Foreigner with Pierce Brosnan, and that was pretty amazing because Pierce Brosnan is just a legend. He's been around for so long, and everyone loves his work. But what surprised me was that right before he would go in front of the camera, he would spend the time to get into character and stay in character until he's shot. So that was unusual to see because you just assume that an actor like him, who's been around for so long, he could switch it on and off. But he really stayed focused, and I think it helped his performance. So it is interesting to see how different actors have different styles of getting into character. Because Jackie can tell a joke to 500 people and then turn around and do a serious scene, and that's the way he is. But he has a different personality with different background.
Yeah. Okay. So, one final question on this topic. Do people associate like certain accents with different
Can you
values?
hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you. Are you able to hear me? Okay.
No, your voice is cutting in and out.
Okay. Is it slightly better now if I'm talking a bit closer?
Yes,
Okay. So
yes,
do
yes, it is.
Okay, okay. So do people associate certain accents with certain values, such as like the British accent tends to sound intelligent, and like maybe why do we certain associate these things together?
No doubt. When you hear a British accent, you tend to think that they're more cultured, they're more educated. But when we were filming The Foreigner in London, the crew was made up of mostly, English people, but their accents were all different, and their accents reflected their educational background. And so that was interesting to recognize. I just assume, oh, British accent means that you're educated, but that is not the case at all. Depends on where you are, where you're from in England. So even the English language, right, depending on where you're from, is revealing of your accent. But it is true that when you hear a Chinese accent, you tend to think that the person is loud, obnoxious, because the Chinese language sounds that way, and it's quite musical, right?
Yeah.
So I've had to do Chinese accents, and I've had to speak Chinese for some of the films and televisions I've worked on. And every time I speak Chinese, it is yelling. It's yelling at somebody.
Yeah. So I guess
But
this,
people have a tendency to, I think,
sorry, that
people
lagged a
have a
bit.
tendency to think of accents. Oh, that's okay. People tend to think of certain accents as a reflection of the culture, the people. But as we all know, it all depends on your background, because the French language sounds so beautiful until someone's screaming at you, with obscenities in French. Suddenly, it's not so beautiful anymore.
Yeah. This kind of transitions perfectly into um, the acting section. So I see that you've been in various movies such as The Joy Luck Club, Sweet November, The Medallion, and The Tuxedo. Can you tell me more about these acting experiences and how you came to like find them?
So my first acting job in film was the Joy Luck Club. After 6 auditions and callbacks, they decided to give me a character, which was Lindo's servant. I was so excited. As I was driving to the set, I kept thinking to myself, what would happen if I crashed into a car? How could I do this important role? Thank goodness it didn't happen. I got to set. I got into makeup, hair, costume. I played a pregnant teenager. And suddenly I see another actor dressed just like me. And I asked her, I said, which role are you playing? And she said, I'm playing Lindo's servant. And I said, so am I. So the director could not decide between the two of us, had both of us get dressed up, and from afar, he was pointing his finger at the two of us, to an assistant director. The assistant director comes up to me and says, so sorry, Diana, but your role was cut. You can go home or you can stay and have lunch. So being an optimist, I stayed and had lunch, and I networked and I talked to people. I got numbers. And the caterer gave me his number and said he wanted to cast me in an independent project he was working on a few months later. So I took his number and I ate my lunch, got my numbers, and I left. And a few months later, I made this independent project with this caterer. And in our film, there was a young boy, and that young boy turned out to be the director, John Chu of Crazy Rich Asians. But that was the experience of Joy Luck Club. It was not a great experience, obviously. Being kicked off a set is not ideal. And it was my first acting film, but it allowed me to join the union. So I was able to become a SAG actor, which makes you look more professional. Um, and it opens more doors. So that was that experience. I was also in one of, I've been in many of Jackie's films, partly because they need somebody and last minute they'll just pull you in. So when we're filming The Medallion, I was 7 months pregnant and they wanted me to play an undercover garbage lady. So I was pushing this garbage cart. I had this big rice paddy hat and I'm pushing it in front of a car. And because they knew I was pregnant, they gave me a stunt double because they were afraid the car was getting too close to me. And it was a good thing because a car actually did hit my stunt double. Not hard, but it nudged her. But it was challenging to shoot that scene because we're filming in the streets of Hong Kong in a section where there are butcher shops. So there's blood all over the floor that's been sitting there for days. And I'm 7 months pregnant, right? So trying to do my scene, trying to work with Jackie and not vomit on the set was challenging.
Yeah, I bet.
Yes. I was also in Sweet November with Keanu Reeves. And it was really exciting because obviously it's Keanu Reeves, right? I was one of 6 actors, and we were told that we were going to improvise a scene with Keanu. So we didn't know what he was going to say, but we just had to speak to him and correspond and keep the scene going. Keanu comes into the scene. He looks at all of us, yells and screams, and then he leaves. And we looked at each other and went, huh? What happened to improvising? After he left, the sound operator came over and said, okay, you guys are going to improvise now into the mic. So we all improvise into the mic saying different things. So when you watch the scene, it looks like Keanu's talking to us and we're having a conversation, but we're not. They just shot his part, he left, they shot our part, and then they edited it all together.
Wow.
Um, when he came to the room, he didn't make eye contact with anybody except me. And he looked at me and he said, hi. And I'm thinking, is he just saying hi to me because I'm the only Asian person other than himself? Maybe, there's that connection there. I don't know. But I thought it was kind of neat. Or maybe because I have a friendly face. I don't know.
Yeah.
So that was that experience. Let's see, what other films can I talk to you about? Oh, Rush Hour 3. In Rush Hour 3, Jackie had to run down the steps of the library. And he felt like there should be more people to push out of the way. So he grabbed my friends and I and put us into the scene. So if you watch that scene, he's being chased, or rather he's chasing. Yeah, he's chasing the bad guy. And he's running through the library and he runs out down the stairs and he pushes all these people, like 3 people. I'm one of those 3. Pushed by Jackie Chan.
I guess, what was it like to be a dialogue coach, and also then an actress and seeing like both sides of the work?
Um, it was really painful because when I first started, I so desperately wanted to be the actor in front of the camera. So working with Jackie and seeing his disregard for the dialogue made me angry and jealous. But I had a job to do and I had to focus on him. But for the first few films I worked with him, I had this feeling of discontent because my career was being pushed aside, right, to help him. At the same time, I was able to make a living, and that felt good because being an actor, you are broke most of the time and you're always struggling to pay your bills. At one point, I worked in 4 different restaurants trying to make ends meet, or I'll park my car blocks away so I would avoid having to pay the meter. So it felt good to get a regular job for months at a time, but it was hard on the ego. And so I had to learn to suppress that and focus on the fact that I was helping someone become a better actor and helping him in his journey to make American films.
So I guess, what was the experience like to be on set and like working with other actors in that whole environment?
It's really exciting because every actor is different and every director is different. Most of the time, actors don't have a chance to rehearse. They have to come on the set and they shoot their scenes. And so you never know what the other actor is going to do until they do it. So there's some excitement in that. But then there are other directors, and this is rare, uh, like Martin Campbell of The Foreigner, who insists on rehearsals with his actors. And it's such a brilliant thing to do it's so obvious because that's what we do in theater. You have to rehearse. Often in television, we rehearse too, but not in film because there just isn't enough time and money to do that, I guess. But this director, Martin Campbell, insists upon it. So when we did scenes for The Foreigner, he would want to rehearse 1 or 2 days before. And it made Jackie so much better because he's forced to practice his line. Because I can only force him so much. And that's why I learned in Rush Hour is I can't force him to do anything he doesn't want to do. No matter what I tell him, what I just can't make him sit there and practice with me. But a director can. And so Martin would force him to rehearse with his actors, and it made his performance better. It made the other actors' performances better. The scene just gelled more. I take it back. We actually rehearsed quite a bit too for Karate Kid because Will Smith was a producer and his son was the star. And he wanted to make sure his son did very well. So we had a lot of rehearsals. In fact, 3 weeks before we filmed in China, we rehearsed in Will's house with Jaden to work out the scenes, to get rid of unnecessary dialogue. But it really helped because it created the chemistry between Jackie and Jaden. And it helped Jaden, because he's a young actor, become a better actor. And also for Jackie, too. To me, any opportunity where Jackie can practice, and rehearse, it makes his performance so much better.
I guess what was your favorite part of acting, and what were some of the challenges in finding like acting roles as an Asian American female?
Well, because I have agents, my agents send me out for auditions. So obviously, when I'm sent out for an audition, there's already a role, right? But when I was in San Francisco, I would audition once every 2 months, every 3 months. But when I was in LA, it was sometimes 2 auditions a day. So there were a lot more opportunities in LA. And obviously, every role I go out for is an Asian role, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm required to speak Chinese. I'm required to speak Mandarin or Cantonese. But I was asked to do a lot of accents, Chinese accents. And it got to a point where I almost just assumed if they wanted me for a part, I had to speak with an accent or I had to speak Chinese. It was shocking to me when I did a scene when I was in Lizzie McGuire. When they asked me to do a scene, they said, "We don't want any accent at all, just perfect English." I'm like, wow, that's such a rarity.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed that opportunity. But I am happy to see that there are more opportunities today for Asian actors than there were before.
Yeah, for sure. And I see that now you work as an entertainment consultant. What does this entail, and why did you kind of decide to also transition into this role?
I have 3 children, and they are 18, 15, and 10. So they are so busy with school and activities. It was really hard for me to go out for auditions. So I told my agent, after being with the agency for 18 years, I said, I can't go out for any auditions right now. I have to take a break. But I have so many friends in the entertainment business that people are constantly coming up to me and asking me, do I know a director? Do I know a writer? Do I know actors? So I'm constantly connecting people, mentoring people, and providing opportunities for all my contacts or reaching out to people to give them opportunities. And that's how I became a consultant because it was something that was easier to do at home in front of a computer or in my car and still be able to drive my children to their activities.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, you have 3 children, and how is the work-life balance, would you say?
It was crazy. When I worked on Around the World in 80 Days, I was maybe 30 uh, 30 weeks pregnant with my first child. We were filming in Thailand. It was really hot, really uncomfortable. And we were filming on uneven terrain. So I was walking on the set like this because I didn't want to fall. And after I came back to the US to give birth, I went back to work on the film in Germany. So I took my baby with me, and my husband came along to take care of our first son. But I was nursing, right? And it was tricky because when you're on a film set, you're there from 12 to 19 hours. So my baby and my husband was in a trailer at base camp while I was on set. But I had to pump my milk for the baby, and there's nowhere to go. So at one point, I was surrounded by 200 extras, and a few friends in front of me covered me with a jacket so I can pump my milk. Then we gave this milk to a PA, a production assistant, who brought it over to a driver, who drove another few minutes to base camp to give the milk to my husband to give to the baby. So it was really tricky having a baby on a film set, but that's what we had to do because I was in the middle of filming when I had a baby. Later on, with my second child, I took him with me to work on Rush Hour 3. And we filmed in Paris for 1 month and 6 months in Los Angeles. So I brought along a girlfriend, Saisi Jang, who saved me, and she helped me take care of my baby for 7 months while staying in the trailer. And my child went from not being able to walk to walking by the end of filming and talking. And he was a really sociable kid because every day he was talking to so many people and he was trying different foods. So out of my 3 kids, he is willing to eat anything. And I think it's because 7 months of being traveling on the road and living in Paris and living in Los Angeles and eating set food has opened up his palate. With my third child, I brought her with me to work on a V8 commercial with Jackie. So I would wear her in a baby carrier and run lines with Jackie, my baby off the set. And my sister came along. My sister Victoria came on and took care of number 3 baby. But it's tricky. Sometimes I've had to leave my kids behind. So when I worked on The Spy Next Door, it was shot in New Mexico, and we shot 5 days a week. I worked there for 5 days a week, and I flew back on the weekends to take care of my kids and hang out with my family. But when I worked on Karate Kid, we were in China. And so my husband Bryant, had to take care of our 2 kids at that time for 2 months, 2.5 months. And so he doesn't cook, so he relied on frozen foods and restaurants. And my last film, The Foreigner, was care of 3.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Hi,
Hi.
did I
Sorry.
lose you?
Yes, I think so. I think you cut off.
Should I answer the question again?
Yes, please. That would be amazing. Or
Okay, I'll start from the films that I worked on and the families I like, the kids. Okay, so did you get the part about working in Thailand and being pregnant there?
yes, I think
Did I
we
talk
cut
about
off
that,
on kid number 3 around
Chelsea?
then. Oh, yeah. Can you still hear me?
Okay. Okay. I can hear you.
Oh,
Yes. But your voice is cutting in and out again.
oh, um,
Okay. So kid number three. I worked on a V8 commercial. Can you hear me? You
yes.
can. Okay.
Yeah.
So with my third child, Elizabeth, I was working on a V8 commercial with Jackie in Los Angeles. And so I would wear her on a baby carrier and then run lines with Jackie. And when we were ready to shoot, my sister Victoria would take my baby away and we would film the commercial. And But it was tricky bringing my kids on these different projects. But each child has come with me on a film set or a commercial set. As they grew older, it was harder to bring them with me. And so when I filmed The Spy Next Door in New Mexico, I would come home on weekends to spend with my family. But my husband had to take care of two kids at the time. When I worked on Karate Kid, it was in China. So my husband had to take care of the two boys at the time on his own, and he did a great job for 2.5 months. And he doesn't cook, but he knows where to go, which restaurants to go to, and rely on frozen foods too. With my last film, The Foreigner, it was shot in London, and so my husband had to take care of all three kids. And everything was great because my boys at the time were older, but my daughter was still quite young. And when she came down with some strange virus and had blisters all over her tongue, um, he was freaking out because it's hard to nurture a child who's not feeling well. And normally I do that, but he had to do it for that period of time. And I was really worried that he couldn't handle it. So every night my bag was packed in case I had to fly back home. But fortunately, he was able to take care of her. Um, and I think each opportunity that I go away allows him to bond with our children in ways that wouldn't have happened if I was around. So it was good to see.
Yeah. Wow. I guess so. In this kind of um, well, this COVID environment, there has been a lot of like anti-Asian sentiment. Have you or your children had to deal with any of this anti-Asian sentiment either at school or elsewhere?
Uh, we live in a neighborhood that's mostly we live in a community that's mostly Asian. So I have not seen that personally, but my friends have experienced it. Sometimes they will experience some racist, you know, somebody will give them make a racist comment to them while they're shopping, or or I don't know. I guess it's happened a lot in San Francisco, but not here where I live. Um, but I keep hearing stories from different friends about how they're affected by it. And so one of my friends, he's a filmmaker. He wanted to make a PSA, so he asked me to be a part of it. So I did. I joined him in making this PSA about AAPI hate, and so that kind of circulated. And a friend of mine is a news reporter, and so she interviewed him and one of the actors and brought even more awareness for what was going on. And it's a shameful thing, but I don't think it's ever really gone away. The fact is, racism definitely has been around forever. People don't get along partly because of cultural differences. The skin color is part of it, but it's really the cultural differences. People are constantly putting down others because they're different than themselves. And I've worked in the film industry for almost 25 years, and I've traveled to so many different countries. And so I've learned that you have to really be sensitive when you go to another country. because what they're saying, what they're doing is different than what you say and do. And often I'm a mediator because Jackie's stunt team are made up of people from Asia, and they're not used to people acting a certain way or saying certain things. So I often had to explain to them and also to others that there is no there is that people are not being rude per se. They're just they're expressing themselves in what is culturally acceptable in their own countries. So I found myself doing that quite a bit. So I do think that that is a problem with racism, is that people just don't understand where people are coming from, and they're shocked, and they're disgusted by the differences rather than trying to understand. And I think that's part of it, of what is a problem, is people lack empathy. People lack, well, education too, and that combined with the racism that's taught in their own families can result in people getting hurt.
What do you think is like the best way to respond to these hate crimes, I guess?
Well, I have a lot of friends doing a lot of different things. The PSA, I think, was important to make people aware that this is a problem. Then other friends are doing things creatively. They're creating more projects with Asians. I have friends who are trying to raise money to make films that put Asians in positive light. And I think that needs to be done perhaps for all cultures. Everyone needs to see someone on television or film or commercials, more people who look like them, right? And I think if we see more people reflected around the world in our projects and our television shows, in our films, then maybe there'll be less anger, less um, mystery, less tolerance, I guess, for people who are different.
Sure. I guess amidst like this anti-Asian kind of environment, do you see the audience's interest in um, like Asians in the entertainment industry change?
I definitely see a huge difference from when I started in this business 30 years ago. There are so many more opportunities now than ever before. My sister is a director, and she's gained more opportunities to direct TV and film. And she's been in this business for almost maybe about 30 years too. And it's great to see her and all my friends who are creative get more opportunities to make projects. That speak of their experiences in life. And I think the more people are able to see the diversity in our community, then they'll be more accepting of people who are different.
Yeah, it's definitely really encouraging to kind of see how like Asian Americans pursuing like these acting roles because we are definitely like an underrepresented group in these like films and movies. So how can our community do better to inspire and support younger generations to kind of pursue their dreams if they want to be an actor or actress?
Well, I guess it starts off with family, right? If you have a supportive family, then you can pursue anything you want to do. But I can't tell you how many of my friends and their families tried to dissuade me from pursuing acting. So many of them said, you could be a teacher, you could be a salesperson. Why do you want to be an actor? You won't make money. You can't get a job. You can't support your family. And I had to tell every single one of them, of course I can teach. Of course I could be a salesperson, but I want to pursue this. But nobody cared, and nobody really valued what I did until I worked for Jackie Chan. So suddenly when I worked for Jackie, they were proud of the work I was doing. But for years, they were trying to discourage me. So I think if families can continue to support, each other, um, if parents will allow their children to find their passion, then that will open up so many possibilities in the future. My husband's friends, almost all of them are engineers. And I don't know how much of it was their true passion and how much of it was their family kind of forcing and pushing them. I know that he was pushed to go into engineering and he didn't want to. He really had to push back and he explored business and finance. But some families believe that if you go down a certain path, it will definitely lead to success. And your happiness is not part of this equation. So that is something that I think every family needs to learn, is to accept that your children are different and they are going to have their different passions and you just need to support them. So it starts from home.
Yeah, for sure. I guess, how can Asian Americans best ensure that our voices are heard in like this industry?
One way is to have more writers, more producers, more investors believe in the importance of having our stories told, right? So a lot of people want to just act, but we need people everywhere. We need people to raise the money. We need people to direct the project. We need people to write it. And I have friends who are doing all that, and they're all trying to bring their stories to light and to make sure that future generations can be proud of them, of their heritage through the creation of these stories, either through for television or for film or comic books.
So yeah, your story is very, very unique. From being a dialogue coach to acting and consulting, do you have kind of a vision of how you want to lead the rest of your life and where you want to apply your talent next?
Um, I enjoy it all, and if I wasn't busy with my kids, I probably will still be doing the same thing. Probably still acting and coaching actors who need help and connecting people and helping people. I do love this industry, and I continue to have friends who need help. So when I see that if I can't help them, if I can connect them to people who could help them, then I do it.
Well, thank you. I that was all of my questions. I know that we were on a pretty tight hour um, time frame, but do you have any questions for me?
Sure. How many of these interviews have you done?
Oh, wow. I want to say at least six.
Oh, that's pretty good. Does it get easier